The regular season begins next week, and you've got questions. We'll answer a few of them coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Monday, March 18th, 2024. This is Tony Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn, that's LOCKDON, to get yourself started. Thank you so much for making us your first listen, subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you're part of the crew and rock with us every single day, let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. You can now get a free 7-day trial to check out the show. The link, as well as our social accounts, is in the description of this episode. And this is Mailbag Monday, the show where we answer your Mariners questions. And we're going to start here with Mr. Unlimited, who wants to know, what do you think a solid record goal should be for the Mariners at the end of April? Should we be worried if they end the month with a 500 record? What record would we have to achieve if we were to win the division?
It's not so much April you have to be better, and it's just the first half in general. It's pretty interesting. There's 6 months in a season. If you finish 3 games over 500 every month, you're going to win 88 games. That puts you right in the mix. Like, you're right around there. So, it's really like, you don't have to win 20 games every month to be a good team. You don't have to win, you don't have to avoid, a sub 500. If you go, 11 and 13 one month or whatever, you don't have to go 21 and 6 the next month to make up for it. And that's kind of the theory, right? So it's really about avoiding bad months, like stacking on top of each other. So, if they go, I don't know how many games they have in April, but if they go 12 and 12 or whatever in April, they go 13 and 13 in April, like, that's fine. Because then if they go 15 and 10 in May, and then they go, 14 and 11 in June, then they're 8 games over 500, nearing the All-Star break. They're in a pretty good spot, probably. And a lot of this has to do with, what are the Astros doing? What are the Rangers doing? How are these other teams playing? Or did they happen to jump out to the Tampa Bay Rays type of, start, and now you're trying to play catch up? That will also dictate. So, I know there's more of an emphasis for the Mariners to get off to a better start this year, but I just don't know how not realistic it is. I just don't. I don't think that you can I don't think you want to try and overvalue these games in April. They're important, but there's still a little bit of There's still a little bit of experimentation going on here, particularly with the bullpen. When you don't have Brash, you don't have Santos. Hopefully, you get them back by the end of April. But there's going to be some trial and error. You're going to have to try some different things here, and guys sometimes just struggle early in the year. Like, there are players who just simply don't perform in April, and it takes them a little while to get going. So, I don't want to put too much emphasis on April. It is, just as important as May, June, July. Like, they matter. Those games absolutely matter. And when they blow a lead or whatever, it hurts, because we know how important every game is. But I don't think that it's wise to go into April and see them go, 12 and 14 or whatever, and just throw your hands up in the air and be like, well, we can't win the division now. Like, that's just not a thing. Every team's going to struggle. Every team is going to have good months. Every once in a while, a team will have a terrible month, or they'll have an amazing month. You just kind of want to avoid the terrible month. So you don't want to be digging yourself out of a hole. You want to be in a position where, come, the All-Star break, essentially, you're within reach of the division, and you're in good spot in like a wild card race type of thing. You just want to be in a position where it makes sense for the front office to see this as a team worth investing in. And so you can do that if you go, 16 and 12 in April. You could do that if you go, 12 and 14 in April, and then you go 17 and 11 in May. Like, it all evens out. So yes, April games matter. Yes, they are, just as important as games in September, but they're also have a much wider margin of outcomes because we don't know who these teams are yet. We're trying to figure things out at the top, even as, spring training doesn't tell us a ton for a lot of the stuff. So just don't bury yourself
You
in
mean
April.
the
We'll
the
be fine.
Mariners are not going to have the best offense and the worst pitching staff in baseball like they've had in spring
Probably
training?
not.
Okay.
Probably not.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, there's going to be, you're going to take a shot on a guy in a bullpen and he's going to struggle for a couple weeks and you're not
Sure.
going to just bench him after, one bad outing. You're going to give the guy some time. Like you're not going to bench Luke Rayleigh after the first week because he's, 3 for 18. You're going to give him some time to try and figure things out. So, April's tough because you just can't react right away, right? You got to let things play out. You have to build a sample size before you can make smart decisions. But sometimes you try and build that sample size out and it ends up biting you at the end of the year. So it's a very, delicate procedure here in April.
Since we're on the topic, the Mariners have been very forthright this offseason in how important April is to them, how much better they want to be in April. How differently do you think they'll attack the early months of the season?
I honestly don't think that I don't know how you can attack like pitchers. You're not going to ask them to go 110 pitches, right? You're not going to, try and push them for an extra out or two in the seventh when they're, 94 pitches. You're just not going to do that in April because you're still playing a long game. You're at,
Mm.
Essentially the starting line of a marathon. Like you're
Mhm.
not just going to burn out and try and build this huge lead. So I don't know if they can. And also with the bullpen, being in the shape that it's in, I don't know if they can be that aggressive with it. They might have to ask, somebody else to step up and go get a fourth out or something like that. So I don't think they can get that aggressive or change that much. I think they just want to play better in the month of April. And I don't know if that means Scott's going to make any changes in personnel earlier or anything like that. I think it's just about playing better in April because there's, like I said, that you can't just make these decisions on very small sample size and not give guys a chance to kind of, get into the flow of the season and try and figure some stuff out. So I don't know if there's a ton they can do. Like, I don't think we'll look at something and be like, last year they wouldn't have done that. And that right there indicates how important these April games are to them. I don't think we're going to see that,
Gotcha.
to be honest.
Gotcha. Gotcha. All right. Next question here from Dylan. How do you evaluate relievers in spring training? When does the scale tip from good appearances to name to watch? For example, Reed Van Scoter, 3 games, 6 innings, 0 earned runs, 11 strikeouts, 0 walks, 3 hits allowed. For me, it's not about the stats, it's about the stuff. It's about, things that guys are working on, things that might be different from the previous year to now. What do I think can carry over? Because stats are secondary, tertiary. They're not even really factoring into the equation here, especially for guys when they're entering these appearances. Um, they're working on things, right? It doesn't matter if they get hit around the park. It's just today I got to work on my changeup or what have you. So I'm going to throw that a bunch, and if it gets hit around, okay, so be it. But
Mhm.
I just want to see does that look like a major league quality offering if it's like a new pitch someone is working on?
Sure.
Or is your velocity roughly around where it needs to be? Stuff like that.
Sure. As for when does it become, go from good appearance to a name to watch? I don't think that happens as often as people think.
Sure.
I think most of the time, clubs in particular, they know who they're watching. Like to make the club, they know who they're watching before spring training starts. Like we're going to keep an eye on this guy and this guy because we think they can factor in. Like I don't think anybody comes into spring training and drastically changes the mind of anybody in who makes decisions in baseball.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think that's more from a fan perspective rather than
sure,
a from a team perspective. Like Tyson Miller, I think is a pretty
yeah,
good example of this. Like I think the
mhm,
team already knew roughly what they had in Tyson Miller,
right,
but now fans are starting to learn about him because fans are starting to see him now, and
right.
beat reporters are talking about him, etc.
Mhm.
All right, we're going to answer a few more of your questions in just a moment, but first, a reminder: this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked-on, that's LOCKDON, and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. And as you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendars for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. On March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern, be the first to get insight from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network, including myself. Find it on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. And let's get back into your questions here on Mailbag Monday. We got one here from OSG. What's the route for Samad Taylor to make the team out of spring training? There isn't one except for injury
trade.
Yeah, knock on wood. Next question here from Costco Hot Dogs. It's a great name.
Mm-hmm.
I would take Blake Snell for 2 years and $66 million in a heartbeat. But then again, I'm not a GM for a reason. What am I missing? Would it be a bad contract for the Mariners? How much would Snell have to take off the asking price for the Mariners to consider it?
How much would Snell have to take off? About $30 million.
So
it's not happening.
Basically make it a 1 year deal. Would you pay him $33 million over 1 year?
Would I?
Yeah.
Yes. Would
Okay.
John Stanton? Not in a million years.
Yeah, no, he won't.
Don't think Jerry Dipoto would either. Would Jerry give him $22 million a year? Probably. If he had that money, like if he had that budget, sure.
It's
But
the same
Snell's,
conversation as the Matt Chapman conversation, just even on a greater scale, right? Like,
Mhm.
all right, let's say John Stanton has a change of heart, or he's willing to make an exception for Blake Snell, right, on a
Mhm.
1 year, $33 million deal. But he tells Jerry Dipoto and Justin Hollander, that's it, though. That's all the money I'm going to give you. That's far more than I was going to give you over the course of the remainder of the season. So if you're Jerry Dipoto and Justin Hollander and you have that information and you basically have a choice to make of Blake Snell or any sort of flexibility for whatever might crop up over the course of the season, because things are going to crop up, just how things are going to go. Even things that you think are set in stone right now might not be in a couple months' time, right?
Mhm.
So it might not just be like, hey, I might have to get a third baseman, by the deadline, or all these other things that, we think they might need a few months down the road, right? Maybe someone gets hurt and now all of a sudden I need to go out and get a second baseman. I need to go out and get a starting pitcher, etc. Whatever, right?
Mhm.
So
Maybe Blake Snell gets hurt.
is that worth sacrificing for Blake Snell, who is the luxury of all luxuries for the Mariners, who have already, without Blake Snell, arguably the best rotation in all of baseball?
First of all, if Blake doesn't fire Scott Boras, at some point this season, he's doing himself a huge disservice. But
Yep.
because Scott Boras has probably cost Blake Snell $100 million.
By the way, like, what's going on with Jordan Montgomery? Right? Because like I
haven't heard anything.
I can kind of wrap my head around the Snell stuff, because obviously there's injury concern. There's the fact that he doesn't get deep into ball games. Walks are a big issue. Like,
Mhm.
there are many reasons for teams to not be sold on basically paying him an elite contract, right? But Montgomery feels pretty safe. Why hasn't he signed? I know he really wants to be a Red Sox. Maybe that's the hang up. Like, he's just trying desperately to get the Red Sox to come to the table, but I don't get that one. The Snell one I can wrap my head around a little bit more, but Montgomery, not at all. I don't know what Boras is doing, but it's very clear. It's become very clear this offseason that teams basically said, we're not taking Boras's stuff anymore. Like, we're not doing this.
I mean, part of it too, though, is Boris's own hubris. Like,
Yeah.
well, Cody Bellinger's not signing for less than $200 million. Nobody's giving Cody Bellinger 200. Blake Snell deserves $9 and $250. Everybody laughed when they heard that. Like, you tried to pump up these players. You're like, oh, Cody Bellinger is Bryce Harper. No, he's not. No, he's not. Blake Snell is Garrett Cole. No, he's not. And teams they're not going to do that. It's particularly in a off season where all the RSN issues have been used as an excuse. Like the owners have a built-in excuse not to spend as much as they should. Of course, they're going to take it. And you peddled your players around like they deserve these elite contracts when honestly, none of them did. None of them deserve $200 million. None. You didn't have a
Yeah.
$200 million player. You overplayed your hand. You got caught. And unfortunately, guys like Jordan Montgomery and Blake Snell are the ones who had to pay for it, and Cody Bellinger and Matt Chapman. Like those guys had to pay for it. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality.
All right. We're going to answer some more of your questions in just a moment. But first, a reminder this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into an MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Again, that is ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen here on Mailbag Monday. Got a couple more of your questions coming up here before we get out of here. Collins It Like It Is asked, MLB.com has Cody Bolton making the roster over guys like Tyson Miller and Ty Buttrey. Just national guys looking at the 40-man roster, or does Bolton have a legitimate shot at making the team? Thanks. Colby, what do you think? Cody Bolton making the roster? He is on
It's
the 40-man.
possible. Sure. It's also worth noting the Mariners have an open spot on their 40-man. So,
Yep.
And they're obviously going to create one when Taylor Trammell doesn't make the team. So if you're wondering how do they get Tyson Miller and Ty Buttrey on the 40-man, they already have the spots open for it.
Also kind of feels like Edward Bizardo is going to wind up on the 60-day.
Yes. So creating spots on the 40-man, not an issue if they want to add.
Clearly doing so to bring in Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery.
Sure. So yeah, Bolton, I know Scott Servais said he was impressed with him on the game on, I think yesterday's game, might have been Saturday's game, that they were impressed with Bolton. They like what they saw from him. So he certainly has a shot. At this stage, though, I would be pretty surprised if Tyson Miller doesn't make the opening day bullpen. But remember, there's 2 spots open. So it could be Miller and Bolton. But I think personally it'll be Miller and Buttrey. We'll see, because Bolton does have options left. He doesn't have to make the team. You could send him down to Tacoma, and you'll probably need him at some point this year. So I don't know. This is national guys just looking at the 40-man, or if maybe potentially was this Kramer or I don't know. If it's Kramer, maybe he's just looking at it and being like, okay, well, who has an edge? It's probably the guy on the 40-man. And in this particular case, that's just not true, because the Mariners have 40-man room to give. Like they've already cleared one spot. We know they're going to clear another with Trammell. They probably are going to have to clear another with Bizardo. They're more than likely, by the time they have to make their opening day roster announcement, they're probably going to have 3 40-man spots open. So pretty easy to fill those with relievers. So I think Bolton's got a shot. Sure. I don't think it's a 40-man thing though. I don't think it's like, oh, well, they're just going to go with the guy on the 40-man because it's easy. Like they don't have to do that.
Next question here from Michael. Which home series is the most exciting matchup for the M's in the first month? Some fun ones with Braves, Cubs, D-backs, and Reds all coming to town. Colby, you're a big schedule guy. You love looking ahead at the schedule. So you kick us off here.
Oh boy, do I. I think for Mariners fans, it probably has to be that Diamondback series, right? You get Eugenio Suarez and Paul Sewald back.
Yeah.
Like this for the first time at T-Mobile Park. Yeah, it's probably that one. The Braves are fun, but the problem with the Braves is that like people are gonna, it's a litmus test. It's like, it's also like April 12th. So not really.
It's a little later than that, but yeah.
Whatever. But you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Oh yeah. So the Mariners sweep the Braves, then they're a World Series contender. But if they get swept, they might have the first pick in the draft next year. Like,
right.
It just, so the Braves are fun. Obviously Olsen and Acuna.
Yeah.
Ozzy Albies, and then probably Max Fried. Like, that's
Strider.
a fun series. Sure, like that's a fun series to go to, but I think from a Mariners fan's perspective, you probably want to go see Paul and Gino, right? Like those guys are such a huge
Yeah.
part of the team the last few years that I think seeing them and giving them the send off or the thanks that they deserve that they haven't gotten to get yet. I think
Yeah.
that's a pretty obvious answer. So for me, it's Arizona.
The Cubs are kind of fun this year, though. So that might be a fun
Yeah,
series to go to.
I mean they're all pretty good series, honestly.
The Red Series kind of lost some of its shine because Noel Alves suspension.
Sure.
But if you like Ellie De La
So,
Cruz,
Ellie De La Cruz, they got some
yeah,
good pitching. Matt McClain, like,
yeah,
yeah, it's fine.
yeah.
I think
But
it's just
I think the obvious answer here though is that Brave series, 29th,
yeah,
30th, and then May 1st. Yeah, that's gonna
sure.
be a fun series.
Technically, not the first month if it ends on May 1st, but whatever, we'll allow it.
Right.
Um,
Colby
but I think
technicality, Pat Node.
sure.
Yeah,
I think the Diamondbacks is actually the pretty easy answer there, just because of who would be coming to town in theory. The interesting thing for me would be if Paul Sewald comes in to save a game, like in the ninth, do fans cheer him when he comes in? Do they, like how do they work that?
right.
Because like if he's coming
Mariners
in,
down 3-2.
yeah,
Seawall
like
coming
if
in.
Paul Sewald's coming in the game, you're
Yeah.
probably losing and you're rooting for him to fail. So I guess the best case scenario would be like they win the first two games and they get to the third game and
Mhm.
like Paul just needs work and the Mariners are up like 6-0 in the
Yeah.
eighth and they're just like, yeah, just throw Paul out there.
Yeah.
And then they'd be like, yeah, sure, whatever. So
Or
we'll
maybe like
see.
the Mariners are up 4-3, but like the heart of the
Yeah.
order's coming up and they're like, screw it, we have to use Seawald here. Like maybe.
Yeah, something like that. But
Yeah. Yeah.
we'll see. But yeah, it'll be really easy to do with Gino. You just do it in the first inning, blah, blah,
Yep.
blah.
Yep.
Whatever. It's a little different
Yeah.
with a reliever. It's a little different. It's particularly a closer coming in. But
I'm also
both
looking
those,
forward to that first road series. Luis Urias revenge series against the Brewers. And then they go to Toronto, which obviously.
nobody cares, Ty. Nobody cares.
Oh, you want to talk about game 2 of the wild card again?
Oh boy, with all my heart I do.
All right, let's go to the next question. Cal's Bobbleface. Some great names in this episode. Cal's Bobbleface wants to know, do you guys ever have interest in working for an MLB team analytics department?
No.
Why?
Stare at a computer with numbers all day? No thanks.
Because you totally don't do that now.
No. I want to be the guy making the decisions. I'll be a GM.
Okay.
But I'll be a GM and I hire some nerds to be in the analyst department.
Right.
But
You're just gonna jump the ladder. You're just gonna go from podcaster to GM. Yeah.
I tell you what, I do a better job than AJ Preller. Fact.
Yeah, a lot of people could do a better job than AJ Preller.
Yeah. But no, not really. I don't think I'm qualified to do that. I'm not good at math. I let other people do math for me. But and then I apply what other people tell me. I'm not qualified to be in the analytics department.
Did you hear that thing that Aaron Goldsmith talked about on Marine Lair the other day? He said, shout out to the Marine Lair podcast, by the way. Right.
Who?
Right. Your best friend, Aaron Goldsmith, who loves your Jerry DePato collection.
Whatever. Dave is better anyways.
We went from Goldie being like top our interview list to like public enemy number 1 for Colby.
Poor man's Dave Sims is what I call him.
But he mentioned on Marine Lair that the Denard Span trade happened because 2 interns brought it to the attention of Jerry DePato and company.
Mm-hmm.
So you could be that intern, Colby. You could finally make the Max Kepler trade happen.
Sure, but first of all, let's point this out. I'm not working for anybody for free. So you could take your BS interns, which nobody should be working, by the way. They're just a privilege for the rich.
They might be paid interns.
If you're doing work, you have to be paid. You don't get paid in experience. Experience doesn't pay the electric bill. Okay, so take your interns title, your unpaid interns, and just shove it up where the sun don't shine, because that is exploitative and it is a benefit only available to those who are financially well off enough to live off of their parents' because they can't afford to work for free 8 to 12-hour days. So screw you, Mariners, if you're using unpaid interns. Also, we also heard that story about Jake Fraley also being an intern idea, and the famous JP Crawford story about how the Mariners came to target JP Crawford. So, it's a very collaborative effort up there, and just at basically anybody who works in the baseball ops department, they'll have a chance to have their voice be heard, but they might not have a chance to cash a paycheck. How dare you?
The way
How
you switched
dare you?
the way you switched gears there was elite.
What can I say? I'm the best in the game.
I'm not dignifying that with a response. Before we get out of here, a reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Ty Dane Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Ty Dane Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Thank you again for making us your first listen. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.